Hey, what's up, guys? Dragon back again, here to tell you that you should be reading My Hero Academia. So, My Hero Academia is a 2014 manga written by Kiyohi Hirokoshi. Hope I said his name right. And basically takes place in a fictionalized version of our world where human beings are born with what they call quirks. Basically, a superpower, of some kind, of a very from anything as minimalistic, like you can move, being able to move small objects, to having super strength, being able to shoot fire, so on and so forth, all the classics. And the story basically follows Izuku Midori, who basically wants to enter the UA High School, which is one of the most prestigious, if not the most prestigious, superhero training school in Japan, if not the world, because he wants to basically follow in the footsteps of his favorite superhero, All Might, who's considered the world's greatest superhero. And if you see images of All Might, he is very much kind of almost a cliche superhero. Cape, tights, big muscles, big grin on his face, truth and justice, the whole nine yard, basically. The perfect role model. And naturally, he wants to be just like him. Problem is, he's one of the very few people who are born without a quirk. He doesn't have superpowers. But meeting All Might and with training with All Might is able to kind of pass along his power and ability onto him, and therefore start training him with these new superpowers. Problem is, his body is not, equipped to handle this power. So rather than even though he has all this strength and ability, for instance, if he tries to throw a punch using the power, called just or one for all is what it's called. He could break his hand because his body isn't strong enough to handle the power. So the story is him kind of progressing with this ability, strengthening his own bodies, and being able to kind of use more and more of this power as it goes along that way. So it's basically, he doesn't just get the power, instantly have all these superpowers. He has them, but he can't just use them, because if he does, it'll probably kill him. So he has to kind of develop, basically built up his body to be able to withstand the use of these abilities. So that's kind of what the story is on the surface. It's really cool. It's really fun. The kid going to a new school with these new powers and learning how to use them. But like we talked last week when we talked about One Punch Man, and how when you have a world where you have people who have superpowers, and how the world will start to basically institutionalize these kind of people, in the sense where they'll create a system of control, a regulatory system of how to utilize people with disabilities. This story kind of takes it even further, whereas now pretty much everyone is born with some kind of ability, with the exception of these rare few individuals who don't have quirks. Otherwise, everyone has some kind of power or ability. And like I said, it ranges. I mean, Midori's mom basically can just move tiny little objects with her mind, and that's the extent of it. Whereas you have some people who can, make their skin hard as steel. So there's varying degrees of usage, and these schools basically now kind of train people. They kind of figure out what they're good for, what kind of what kind of hero they can be, and basically they groom and train people to be superheroes. They have this, these associations that when they're in high school, they have scouts who come in, where you'll basically kind of do like internships for different, hero organizations. So basically you're going to kind of be integrated into society as a hero if you have some kind of power and ability. They have villains, people basically who kind of are criminals with, extreme superpowers. And basically these kids are being trained in school to go out there and combat these guys, and they get sponsors and everything. And it's really cool to see how the world has just embraced superheroes, and it's just kind of status quo. But at the same time, there is kind of a deeper underlying kind of theme here, when you realize that these kids are essentially being trained and almost bred to fight and potentially die. There is even cases where you have stories where now, like, certain people with abilities will almost have like arranged marriages, so they can basically have children with other people of other kinds of abilities, so they can kind of create offspring, if you will, who have hybridized ability. In the case of one of these characters, who basically has the power of fire and ice, his father, has the second greatest hero in the world, and he's got the ability of fire, and his mother had the ability of ice. So they kept having kids trying to have this perfect, hybridized, child who had the powers of ice and powers of fire. And they'll, it's a society that is now basically kind of centered around the formation and creation of superheroes. And while that seems like a great thing, which it is, I mean, we have supervillains, so you definitely want people who can combat them. These kids don't really question it. I mean, this is the society they grew up in. This is the life they are going to be instilled in. So if you have any kind of superpower that is, you know, useful in any way, you're going to kind of, in some way, be working, as a kind of offensive force against, villainy, kind of whether you like it or not. It's just kind of expected of you. So again, it's looking at a society that has taken something, institutionalized it, regulated it. Like, you see a lot of Western superheroes, even when the world is aware of these superheroes exist, a lot of times they are met with kind of fear and scorn, whereas it seems like in Japan, these kinds of stories, like, well, let's just say superheroes are everywhere, that it's no longer a unique thing. So let's just have the society kind of form around that. So it's kind of showing you like how something that we might deem, as abnormal and maybe even wrong to kind of be indoctrinating children, in a system where they're being groomed to fight and potentially die. Whereas in this society, it's normal and it's expected and nobody questions it. It's just the way it is. And I'm not saying that, okay, it's wrong. I mean, within the context of this society, this system that they have in place works very well, so, but it's kind of goes without question. No one really questions. You don't see anyone kind of really, initially anyway, kind of question the kind of the morality. It's just expected and everyone wants to get in. Everyone wants to be the best hero they can be. And you have these big grand tournaments where they have scouts who come and watch these kids do battle with one another, with utilizing these impressive abilities and powers, and it's like they're scouting it, for almost like you would like an athlete, so they can go and be on the front lines and potentially put their lives at risk. And you do have stories of heroes who die or get mortally wounded, and so it is a dangerous job. But that's what they're going to school for. They're not going to school to become doctors or lawyers or teachers. They're going to school to learn how to be warriors for our society. These are kind of the guardians of our way of life. We continue to live the way we do. Society continues to function because they are the watchdogs against those who have powers and abilities, who would do us harm, who would bring it all down. Without these heroes, our society would crumble because there are others out there with powers and abilities who have malicious intent, as you see in this series. So it's an interesting kind of social commentary, and again, how society would view something when it is no longer a minority. If you only have a few people with powers cropping up here and there, these people are freaks, they're abnormal, they're looked down upon, they're treated with mistrust, But when everybody has powers, when everybody is born with some ability, the irony is the person who's not is considered more the freak. Now, he's not treated poorly. I mean, he gets bullied in school and stuff like that, in middle school in the beginning. But it's not like society shuns them and says they don't have rights, But they are now the odd man out. They are the other because they don't have abilities. Because now it is normal to have powers and abilities. That is common. So what happens when everybody has something? Well, society rallies around it. It forms itself around it. It shapes itself, in this case, around it because it's considered normal. It's not abnormal to be able to fly. It's not abnormal to be able to shoot fire out of your hand. It's not abnormal to have super strength. These are normal things. But to have someone who can't do any of that, that's abnormal. That's weird. That's strange. And it's so interesting to see this take on a superhero story. Or even in One Punch Man, where yes, heroes were prevalent, it wasn't everybody was born with a power. There were still select few. Whereas this is a world where everyone's got pretty much has some kind of power and or ability. Again, it varies. Not everyone has like superpowers, but most people can do something, what I mean? So, and the people who have powers and ability that are more grand and more spectacular, these people are more revered. These people are more sought after. So, it's interesting to see a world where you take something that's normally in these kinds of stories, the minority and make it the majority, and how the society changes. No, you look at like X-Men when you have, like the Senate and Congress and everyone trying to pass laws and regulations to kind of hold mutants down, hold people with abilities down, restrict their access, restrict their movement. And in a world where they're the majority, it's the exact opposite. The laws are in place to kind of promote and lift up these kinds of people. So it's a very interesting piece of social commentary that I think takes what, like, even something like One Punch Man did and pushes it even further. And it kind of makes you realize that here we are training kids to potentially die, and we don't even think anything of it, because that's society. That's the way it is now. These people are the majority, and for society to continue, we need people like them in place to protect, those with lesser abilities, from those who have great abilities who would do us harm. And it's not to say they're taking just little kids and throwing them out there. I mean, they go through school, then after school, they get, accepted into like different associations and academies. So by the time they really get on the front lines, they're already more adults. So it's not they're just taking kids, but they start grooming them at a very young age. So when kids are really small, they're already looking up to their favorite superhero, and they want to grow up to be like that. They want to grow up to do that kind of thing, And no one is discouraging. No one is telling them, well, it's dangerous. Maybe you shouldn't. No, it's very much encouraged. Everyone wants to do that because that is what you're supposed to do. So it's a very interesting story. And again, on the surface, it's wildly entertaining. And, I love the art style. I love the aesthetic. It's a great story with really interesting characters. But it has this very kind of interesting bit of social commentary kind of running through it that I find very, very fascinating. As someone who didn't really grow up reading superhero comics, it was never my thing. I was always reading more manga and stuff. So now it's funny that manga is doing superhero stuff. I like seeing this different take on it. This kind of maybe perhaps Eastern view on a Western concept and how they interpret it and how they kind of tell a different kind of story with it. So if you guys love superhero comics, check this out. It's a different take on the superhero genre, and one that, if you've grown up reading superhero stuff, you might really find interesting because it's different. Or if you just, like me, are a fan of like, action manga and like a lot of the shonen stuff, then definitely you'll probably really enjoy this one. But yeah, My Hero Academia, it's a very interesting story, and right now it's very popular. There's an anime that's going on right now that's, doing very, very well. The manga is still ongoing. But I'll, as always, I'll leave some links in the description section below where you can kind of check it out for yourself. But if you have read it, what do you think? How do you think of the story so far? How do you feel about kind of this bit of maybe, not more subtle social commentary? Because again, it's not super over. It's not beating you over the head with it by any means, but it's very much there. So have you guys thought of it that way? Have you maybe looked at it that way? Am I maybe just reading too much into it? I don't know. But if so, what do you think? If you haven't read it, check it out. Come back, give me some of your thoughts. Let me know. Especially if you guys read superhero comics. You read Marvel, you read DC, you read Image. If you are kind of already a fan of this genre, I'd be very curious to kind of get your take on this. How do you feel about it? How do you feel the portrayal of like superheroes in this world is, and when you comparison to maybe how we do it in Western comics? So anyway, give me some of your thoughts. Let me know. I'll try to jump in there with you guys and weigh in as always as when I can. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace!